This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
If you want to print a simple hello in programming languages like Java, you need to do it for at least 5 to 6 lines of statements. If you know just the simple basics of Java or the structure of Java, you should write as a public class and followed by the class name. Okay, some class name. Then you are going to write something called public static void main and some string. This is how it's going to be in Java. And even if it is C# or something also, you would have it almost similar 5 to 6 lines of code only. Okay, this is how you write it in Java. And even if it is a C# or most of the programming languages, you require at least 4 to 5 lines of code to print a simple hello. Okay, and to understand what each of these is, what is public, what is class, what is static, what is this void, and what are all these, to understand them only takes around a couple of sessions. Okay, whereas in Python it requires very less code. Just say print hello within the parentheses. Okay, whatever you want to write, put it inside parentheses, and a prints it. This is as simple in Python. Okay, so Python, as I told, requires less code. Okay, easy to learn, so English like, so easy to understand. Just like your SQL, Python is also English like language. Of course, SQL is not procedural, whereas Python is procedural language. SQL is declarative language, whereas Python is procedural language, but both are very easy to understand. Okay, so and for many countries, this is first language to learn. In many countries, this is the first language to learn. So it is so simple that it is introduced as the first language in many countries. Of course, in India, if you are Indian, first language is the C programming language for many other reasons, okay, which we don't want to go into those details now. But coming to ease and usage outside, Python is widely used than C in the outside world. Okay, so Python is the first language to learn in many countries. And other advantages of learning Python, Python is fastest growing programming language, and Python is general purpose programming language. So any idea of what general purpose programming language is? Say if you take your SQL, you cannot write or design an application using SQL. You can only use it to store data or retrieve data, and you cannot do anything else than it. If you take something like Fox Pro or Lotus, Lotus is only used to maintain spreadsheets. Fox Pro is also not general purpose programming language. It's only specific special purpose programming language. Okay, whereas if you take simple examples of some applications, I don't want to go into examples of programming languages because you might not have heard them, but say we'll take simple examples of applications like your QuickBooks or Tally. They are mainly used for accounting purpose. Okay, if you take your Excel file, it's only used to maintain spreadsheets. Your Power BI is only used for design. Whereas some programming languages also, of course, these are applications, whereas some programming languages also, they are not intended for doing anything you want. They are only directed towards specific task. Whereas general purpose programming languages are those languages using which you can do anything you want. Some examples of general purpose programming languages include your C, C++, Java, .NET, and Python. So what these general purpose languages do is you can write any kind of application using them. Like you can write a mobile application, you can write a desktop application, or even you can write another programming language altogether using these programming languages. Okay, and then Python supports multi-programming paradigm. So what is multi-programming paradigm? Guys, if you have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask me. Okay, it can be interactive. It need not be only that only I speak and you keep on mute. It need not be like that. Please be interactive. If you have questions, you can just stop me. Okay. So Python supports multi-programming paradigm. So what is a programming paradigm? Programming paradigm is the style in which you write your program. There are many styles using which you can write the program. Say, for example, C programming language supports structured programming, whereas Pascal is another programming language which supports procedural oriented. Okay, whereas Java supports object oriented. I am writing it in simple two letters O, object oriented. Scala is there another programming language. It supports functional programming. Okay, whereas there are few languages like C++ which supports more than one programming paradigm. C++ supports both structured programming and object oriented programming. Coming to Python, even .NET supports only one programming paradigm, which is the object oriented. Whereas coming to Python, it supports multiple programming paradigm. It supports many paradigms like functional, structured, object oriented, and also scripting. It supports even scripting. Okay, there are many programming paradigms that Python supports. What is the advantage? How are we benefited if it supports multiple programming paradigms? So each programming paradigm will Spark falls into which category? Spark is not a programming language. Okay, Spark in fact is a platform. Okay, like your or a framework. If you say .NET framework, in fact, I am saying .NET is object oriented. In fact, .NET as I used it in general manner, it's not a programming language. .NET is a framework. On top of the .NET framework, there are many programming languages like C#, .NET, ASP.NET, so on and so forth. But all of them are into what you say object-oriented paradigm only. But whereas Spark framework, there are many uh, programming languages built on top of Spark framework. Like Scala is built on Spark framework, PySpark is built on Spark framework. When it comes to Scala, as already told, it's functional. PySpark, it's again Python based and it supports multiple programming paradigms. So you cannot say into which uh, programming paradigm Spark falls into. Okay, so Spark can be into anything based on which language you are using. If you use Scala, Spark is functional programming. If you use PySpark or Python, it can be anything. Okay. So what is the advantage if it supports a multi-programming paradigm is it will be easy for developer to choose which style of code he needs to write based on the complexity of the project and the type of the project he is developing. He can choose which programming paradigm he needs to implement. Uh, Thereby, it will be easy for the programmer to choose which kind of paradigm he wants to develop. Say, for example, if he wants to develop a complex web application, he might need to go for object oriented. Okay, if he is developing a simple desktop application, he can go with the structured programming. Okay, if he wants to doesn't want to write any complex programs, but he just want to get some files from the operating system and look through them to read their contents or such thing, he can just go for scripting language. Okay, so based on what he wants to do, he can choose which programming paradigm he wants to write the code in. Okay, thereby Python is very helpful there. Okay, and other things about Python are Python, okay, offers many jobs in the market, which is very important for us. And before that, Python supports or has special support for technologies like data science, sorry, data science, big data, machine learning, natural language processing, etc. Okay. In fact, Python was invented in 1989, I suppose, which is 1 or 2 years earlier than Java. But Java picked up very fast, and Java stood in first position for many years. Okay, but Python was lagging behind many programming languages. There are many programming languages which were ahead of Python since around 7 to 8 years ago. But around almost 7 to 8 years or 10 years ago, there came the new technologies like big data, data science, machine learning, natural language processing, whatever you call, all the advanced or the new generation technologies. With all these emerging technologies, Python has a huge special support for them. And because of this, Python suddenly rapidly went on growing. And now Python is the top contender for the first position. Let me show you. Okay, I suppose you might have heard the name Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a widely used programming website. There are many programmers who go to the website and post their questions and get answered. Okay, so this Stack Overflow annually takes survey from all over the world. Many developers uh, participate in this, and according to the Stack Overflow and many other websites, Python is the fastest growing programming language. Now, if you take the latest year results, 2019 results, let me go to this technology. Where does this Python stand with respect to technologies in the world with respect to the popularity? You can see JavaScript. JavaScript stands in the first place, but JavaScript is not a programming language. It's only a scripting language. So when I say scripting, this is not this kind of scripting which Python supports. Okay, JavaScript is different kind of scripting. Python scripting is something like your Linux shell script or Windows PowerShell script. Okay, so don't get confused with the scripting and JavaScript scripting. Okay, and even HTML, CSS, these are all markup languages, and SQL is also not general purpose programming language. So when it comes to general purpose programming language, Python is strongly contending with Java for the first position. You can see this is the shell script, Bash, Linux shell, or Windows PowerShell. This is the shell script which I am talking about. Python supports this kind of scripting. Okay, so this is in the next position. But with respect to general purpose programming language, Python and Java are sharing the first position. Then is C Sharp, then PHP, then C++. Okay, so even if you take only the professional developers, even you can see Python is still in the first position, sharing its place with Java. 39.4 and 39.2 almost similar. Okay, so Python, as I told, is now the top contender for the first position, and according to many surveys, it is the fastest growing. And now let's go ahead and see which is the most cloud programming language. Rust is the most loud, then is Python. Python is the second most loud language. Whoever is already working on that particular language, they allow to work on Python. Okay, then dreaded, who is frightened to work on which language. You can see Python is not at the top of the list, might be it is somewhere at the bottom. We don't see it even at the bottom. Okay, means it is much less than this thing. It is somewhere, very few people are frightened to work on Python. And who is not working on it and wants to work on it, Python stands in the first position. Python stands in the first position. Okay, and coming to development environments, which environments are there? PyCharm is used for Python, IntelliJ is used for Python. Okay, and Jupyter Notebook, okay, is also okay. I think there was a disconnect for a couple of seconds. Jupyter Notebook is also used for Python. Okay, so these are the most commonly used. Even coming to the, there are some frameworks. Where do you frame this? Okay, frameworks is not given, but coming to top paying technologies, Python individually is not though really top paying technology. Python stands somewhere here in the middle. Python though individually is not top paying technology. If you go and learn any of these emerging technologies like the data science, machine learning, natural language processing, and thereby if you use Python on top of them, for sure you will be on the top of the list. You'll be on the top of the list. Okay, so that's about Python. And if you want to learn correlated technologies along with Python, if you want to learn something, of course, if you guys are already into data engineering, that's great. Okay, but what should you learn in combination with Python? Say, for example, which tools to use at least. Okay, PyCharm is most commonly used with Python. Let me see where Python is. It's missing. If you guys can figure out, you can just let me know where Python is.
By your left. That's by
In the
your
middle.
right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Here is your Python, and along with Python, PyCharm, as I already told, is the most commonly used what you say framework or IDE, and then is the Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebook is also commonly used. And coming to frameworks, which frameworks are used with Python is and next, before frameworks, there are many variants of Python. I will tell you those variants either today or in the next session. One of the most commonly used variant of Python is Anaconda Python and IPython. You can see here it shows IPython. This is the most commonly used variant of Python. Anaconda Python and IPython are most commonly used. Anaconda Python is not mentioned here though. It comes to next to IPython maybe. And then coming to frameworks, which frameworks are used? If you are a web developer, you generally use Django and Flask. Okay, if you are a machine learning guy, you go and use generally TensorFlow and PyTorch. Okay, data science guy generally uses are pandas. If you are data analyst or a data engineer, you generally use pandas. Okay, these are the most commonly used frameworks with respect to different technologies with Python. Okay, so since you guys are data engineers, you should know pandas. I will cover the basics of pandas as well in this course. Okay, this is about Python, where it stands, and let's go ahead and see what we see as part of this course. This course is aimed at people who don't know basics of Python as well. So we start from scratch. Okay, this is not for those who already know Python. This is for people who don't know Python. So we start from scratch. We'll start with introduction to Python, how to install and how to configure Python. Then we will use different IDEs like Python shell, Atom, and PyCharm. I can also at the end give an introduction to Jupyter Notebook. Okay, because it is being most commonly used by the data engineers. So I can give an introduction to Jupyter Notebook as well. And now in the market, there are two variants of Python, Python 2 and Python 3, whereas Python 2 it has reached its end of life, but still there are many projects on Python 2. So I will just give a brief differences between Python 2 and Python 3. Any new project started in the past 3 to 4 years, or in fact 5 years, are being started only in Python 3, but there are many old projects which still run on Python 2. Okay, then we'll start with simple basic programs and then see about indentation in Python, or the structure of the Python programming language. And Python is purely interpreted based languages and not compiler based language. We'll see what's the difference between interpreter, compiler, a translator, why they are used, all these details. And then we'll learn how to read input from user at the runtime. Okay, there are two ways. We'll see how to do it using both the types. We will see many of the conversion functions and some basic functions as well. There are many operators in Python. We will see the most commonly used operators. Okay, throughout the program, at the beginning of this, we'll be seeing these operators, and while the course goes, we'll see the other operators as well. And we'll see many control structures like the conditionals, if else, while loops, and for loop, etc. Okay, we will also learn about exception handling, which is very important in the real time scenarios. Then coming to the Python core concepts, we will learn about some of the data structures or containers in Python, like the list, tuples, strings, okay, stacks, queues, dictionaries, etc. We'll do some problems, or we'll do some programming there. Then we'll learn about the built-in functions. Of course, built-in functions we'll learn much prior to that. Here we'll see about user-defined functions, how to pass arguments to functions, and how to return values. We'll also understand between what's a method and function. We'll see some miscellaneous concepts of Python. Okay, how to write commenting, how to install packages, how to uninstall packages, how to update the existing package, etc. And then we'll learn about namespacing scope. Okay, means here, say for example, a variable is declared outside a function. How do you call it inside a function? If you are a SQL guy, you know the procedures and functions. If you declare a variable outside a function, how do you call it inside a function? If you declare another variable with same name inside the function, what happens? And similarly, we have something called namespaces as well. How do you use these namespaces? And what if you want to call a file in another program? Okay, I write a program in one file, how do I call it in another file? All these things we see in the file handling. How do you create files? What are the different file modes, and how do you do it? We'll see simple text processing or simple file processing here. Then we'll go with some advanced concepts of Python, like object-oriented programming. We will learn many concepts of object-oriented programming, like abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Of course, Python does not support a few of them. We'll see how to do it as a workaround. Then we'll learn the concepts of regular expression. Regular expression is very important if you are doing data analysis. So we'll learn the basic concepts of regular expression, and I will suggest further readings for you where you can learn regular expressions in detail. Okay. Then we'll go with the database connectivity and CRUD operations, create, retrieve, update, and delete. Okay, we'll use a simple SQLite. If you want, I can also show it with MySQL. Okay, so we'll do the basic CRUD operations here. Then we will go ahead and learn the concept of the data frames or pandas, as I told you. Okay, we'll be learning these things, some of the group bys, joins, and aggregations, some basics of pandas. Okay, then also we'll understand a simple HTML and JSON, how to parse a simple JSON file or how to parse a simple XML file. So this is what we are going to learn throughout our course. Any questions? No questions? Good. Thank you.
Sir, Ranjit here.
Let's go ahead and see. Yeah. Ranjit, and by the way, you need not call me sir. I am a software developer just like you. Yeah, please.
Sorry, my bad. So I have this question, like so PySpark and NumPy, these are all similar frameworks that are used for, and where are these used exactly in the data engineering role? Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, PySpark and NumPy. PySpark is another a framework kind of a thing, and NumPy is one of the modules used as part of the data analysis. NumPy mainly used for mathematical calculations. Okay, whereas this pandas is mainly used for text processing, and if you want to read a Excel file or a CSV file, and if you want to join multiple CSV files or multiple Excel files, or you perform aggregations on top of them, you use pandas. Whereas NumPy is mainly used for mathematical calculations. If you want to perform any mathematical calculations, you generally go for NumPy. Okay, NumPy is not only used with mainly used with machine learning more than the data engineering part. As data engineer, you do very less of mathematical operations, but it might be if your job demands, you might be using NumPy. But pandas is our data frames. In pandas again is a vast thing. Inside pandas, most commonly or most popular thing is data frames. Okay, data frames are most commonly used for this data engineering role. Okay, am I clear?
So is it exactly in the ETL part, or like is it before or after?
No, it is
data?
It comes in the transformation part, not before, not after. It comes in the transformation part. So ETL is extract, load, and transform. There will also be ELT. Okay, means you can load first and then perform the transformation. Wherever you want to perform the transformation, there you go for pandas or data frames.
Okay. So sorry, my bad if I'm asking too many questions, but I have another question, like, because from the background that I came, I've used SAP Business Objects Data Services, which is an ETL tool. So there we use various kinds of transformations, readily available transformations provided by the tool itself for transforming the data. But so here those ready-made transformations won't be available here. So that means that's what I understood. So that means when you explain me, so we'll be using some kind of coding using these pandas to transform the data while loading, right?
Yes, yes. Within this programming language only, you will have the inbuilt functions. Okay, just like you have their inbuilt tools, you have inbuilt functions here. You are just going to use these functions and perform the transformations.
Okay, so no ready-made transformations available other than these. I mean, we should be using only these functions to do the transformations.
Yes, these are all ready-made only, right? These functions are already made. You are just going to pass parameters to it. Say, for example, a join requires 2 data frames and a condition, and it will join 2 things, 2 data frames. Data frames are nothing but
Oh, sorry,
they can be 2
sorry, my
Excel
bad.
files,
I
or
felt
they can be 2 CSV.
correct. I mean, what I mean to say is like this is not like a GUI interface. Like what I mean to say is
Yes, yes,
it's
this is
not like a
not
drag
like
and drop.
GUI. Yes, yes.
Mhm.
The beauty with
Thank
this
you,
is
Ram. Yeah,
no problem,
good.
no problem. The beauty with this is you can use this Python on top of your big data, or on top of your Azure. If you are using AWS, whatever you are using, it doesn't matter. You can just use this. Okay, and that too, both even the Google Cloud also supports this. Okay, if you want to perform transformations even on a Google Cloud, you can use Python. Okay, whereas your something like your SSIS or whatever the language you said, business objects, they cannot be integrated with any of the or all of the tools. I cannot say any of the, with all of the tools. They are compatible with only very few, whereas this Python is compatible with almost 90% of the what you say cloud platforms or the big data platform. If you are using Apache, Spark, or Cloud or a big data platform, still Python is supported. Okay, and most important thing is Databricks. If you are into either Azure or AWS, Databricks is the most commonly used thing. And on top of Databricks, it supports only few programming languages, including R, Scala, okay, Spark, and it is Spark means SQL. It supports SQL. It is Spark SQL. Okay. Again, as I told, Spark comes in many variants. Spark SQL is one of the variant. It supports SQL and Python only. Okay. So one of these 4. Whereas R is not general purpose, and Spark SQL is also not general purpose. Only Scala and Python are the general purpose programming languages here. Okay.
I heard about this Matplotlib, but don't know where exactly it's used. You have any idea on that? So can you please throw?
Yeah, yeah. Even Matplotlib is see these frameworks are not just used only in this particular technologies. Nothing like that. It depends on where or what your problem scenario is. Matplotlib was initially used by these guys like the mechanical engineers or civil engineers, but now it is being used even by the data analysts. But I have never used this Matplotlib. There are many frameworks, almost 160,000 frameworks in Python, okay, or packages in Python. Okay, Matplotlib is also used by these engineers. Mainly, it's used by the civil and mechanical engineers for their designing purposes. But now these days, it is being used by the data analysts as well, or the data scientists. In fact, not data analysts, the data scientists are using the Matplotlib as well.
So the framework and libraries, are they the same thing?
Framework and library, it did not be same thing. Library is part of the programming language, whereas framework is something different. Framework specifies you should write your programming language in this manner. This should follow these principles is what the framework says. And on top of the framework, you can write any programming language. Like for suppose, as already told, Spark is a framework, whereas on top of the Spark, there are many programming languages like the Spark SQL or Scala or the PySpark, whereas library is part of the programming language. Okay, it's
Yeah,
not.
because why I got confused is I know that Matplotlib is a library. So
Yes,
when you're
it's a.
saying it's a framework now, that's why I got confused.
I'm sorry, it's a library. Matplotlib is a library, not a framework.
Okay.
Matplotlib is a library which is part of the Python. Okay, might be in a flow. I used the wrong wording, but it's not framework.
Okay.
Any other questions? If you have no questions, we'll just see one more concept of where Python stands with respect to speed and efficiency. Okay, let's see where Python stands with respect to speed and efficiency, and we'll close it for the day. So HackerRank is a site used by professionals for coding challenges and also to improve their skills, and some companies also use HackerRank for the initial round of interviews. Okay, so these guys have taken a sample scenario and compared the speed of different programming languages. Okay, so we'll see where Python stands with respect to the speed based on the scenario taken by these guys. It will be, you can see what the statement is if you want to see the statement. Okay, here you can see the statements, and they have taken how another scenario of where writing into files. Okay, but we don't want to go into all those details. We'll just see this one, programming language, the environment. C++ or C, these two stand on the top. Okay, another variant of C++. Okay, these stand on the top. They finish off this particular sample task in 2 seconds, and they require 512 MB of memory. Okay, if it's the standard challenge. And they also took a machine learning challenge scenario, and they finish off in 2 seconds, and 512 MB of memory is required. Whereas C#, it takes 3 seconds. Python 3 or Python 2, this is Python 2, Python 3 takes 10 seconds and requires 512 MB of memory. This here also takes, in the machine learning challenge, also takes 10 seconds and requires 1024 MB of memory. Okay, Python is same with respect to speed when it is either the standard or machine learning challenge. As you can see, these are much superior to Python, but why Python is going fast is C#, as you know, it doesn't support other environments other than the .NET framework, and .NET supports only the what you say Windows OS and does not support any other operating system. But whereas Python is also okay platform independent. You can write code on any platform and you can execute it on any platform. Okay, Python is also platform independent, unlike C#. And then where does other programming languages like Java stand with respect to standard challenges? Okay, Java in this scenario finishes off in 4 seconds and requires 512 MB of memory, which is much faster than Python. Coming to machine learning or natural language processing challenge, it takes 50 seconds, whereas Python is much faster here. That's why Python is becoming very, very popular when it comes to this data science or machine learning, all these kind of tasks. Okay, And also Python has a huge support. There are many libraries which support these special scenarios like Beautiful Scope, PyScripto, NumPy, SkyPy, Pandas, NLTK, Scikit-learn, so on. Okay, these are all mainly used for machine learning, okay, data science, big data, and many other things. This PyCrypto is mainly used for what you say, this cryptocurrency mining or other kind of things. Okay, so there is something called PyPy. We'll understand what PyPy is at a later on, but you can see this is at par with Java with respect to standard challenges, and with respect to machine learning challenges, it is much faster than normal Python. We'll understand what this PyPy is in the next session whenever we take it. Okay. So this is where Python stands with respect to its speed. Okay, and there are many things like JavaScript which are at par with Python, but the problem is these are not general purpose programming languages, and also there is not huge community support. Okay, and a few other important things about Python are Python is open source. I suppose you know what open source is. Okay, it's free, as well as you can also get the source code of it. Okay, whereas free is different. Free is only you can use it for free, but you cannot get the source code. Python, you can get the source code. You can develop your own uh, programming language on top of this source code. Okay, I will give some scenarios of who all are have developed and what are the most common variants of Python. Okay, and also Python is community based, means it's not that only one company is completely responsible for all the development. The community decides what should be there in the next versions of Python, if something has become obsolete, if it should be removed from the Python. Okay, and all these things are decided by the community based on discussion and votings. Okay, we'll understand those concepts as well in the next sessions. Yeah, please let me know if you have questions, else we'll close for today. Okay.